Hello, everyone. This is Marianne with the Sustainable Living Podcast. And today we bring you a show with Emily and Art Laubach. They are both going to be talking about Emily's favorite subject, tiny homes, and are going to tell us about an conference coming up in Colorado where Emily is actually going to be a speaker. But before we get started on this, I wanted to give a big shout out to all our wonderful supporters on Patreon. So, Patreon. I should be able to say it right? And I know you all are going to rush over there trying to support us now. Just a little warning, it's not very updated. Said we are in changes and just haven't spent the time yet on really updating it and making it look good for you. But we will. We promise. It's going to happen. I'm just not going to give it a timeline because I don't want to make a promise I can't keep. Nevertheless, we are so grateful for every one of you who is supporting us. And I wanted to give a big shout out to you. Karen Johnston. Thank you. Lisa Davis, Erickson Diaz, Jennifer Telford, Tatiana Sinitskaya. And I'm sorry, Tatiana, because I'm sure I just said your name completely wrong. Forest Creek Meadows, Sustainable Human, Kristen Miyashiro, Jack Wolfman, Heinrich Hörnlein-Rummel, Ben Kotnick, Pari, Chenki, Onika Miyashiro, Heidi Hörnlein. Thank you so much. You are making it possible so that we can bring this show to you on a regular basis. You are so appreciated. And thank you to all of you who are tuning into our show and listening. We really appreciate you. Without you, we wouldn't have a show. And we know you have lots of choices. So we really love it that you are tuning in and listening in to what we have to say. Emily wanted me to tell you that during the call they had a bit of sound problems. So sometimes the sound quality is not quite what we like to bring to you. But the subject is so interesting and she really wanted you to have all the information. So please forgive us if sometimes the sound is not quite as wonderful. Saying that our sound is wonderful, right? Anyways, sometimes there will be a little plinks in there. Please forgive us.
Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Living Podcast. This is Emily and I'm here today with Art.
Hello.
And Art has quite the extensive bio. I hope you guys are ready for this. I've been so excited to have Art on the podcast. Art started gaining construction experience in his youth working with family businesses, spending the summers working on roofing, siding, and other construction on the East Coast. Since then, Art has gained invaluable knowledge and experience in many different facets of construction. Art has experience with concrete and pier foundations, wood and steel framing, outdoor structures, deck, complete renovations, building additions, geodesic dome construction, and now building the best tiny house shells you can find. Art is the builder for Einstyne Tiny Homes and a geek for building science, airtight construction, green building, and always striving for ways to ensure the greatest quality builds for the customer. Art is also an avid animal advocate and loves spending time with his pets, volunteering with animal organizations, and is very excited to bring the Colorado Tiny Festival to life here June 22nd through the 24th. Well, welcome again, and thanks for being here, Art.
Thanks for having me.
I would love to get started. Art is, one of the more unique tiny home builders because he does have a passion for sustainability and green building. So Art, I'm wondering, are tiny houses a practical way to bring sustainable living to the masses and how you see that kind of playing out?
Yeah, so I think that smaller structures just in general, whether they're tiny houses on wheels or a yurt or, a small home on a foundation are obviously a great way to help with sustainability. Smaller footprint is obviously the immediate benefit of living tiny. But beyond that, and by smaller footprint, I mean everything. When you build your home, you're generating less waste. When you're using your home, you're using less energy, or you're using less propane or whatever building materials you're using, or heating or cooling type systems you're using. So yeah, definitely. It absolutely would have a major impact.
So I know when we built our tiny home, we were just scrambling to find sustainable innovations that are non-toxic and green, and just a way to get sustainability into our tiny house, because it was, this was back in 2015. So it was still kind of a new thing as far as like tiny home builders and kind of innovations to make, because some of this stuff is used in large homes, but it's a whole new ballgame when you bring it into such a small space. So what are some of your favorite green innovations that you are noticing for the tiny house movement?
Well, it seems like sustainable and green building, whether it's materials or technology, is kind of a booming industry, even for regular sized residential homes. There's a lot of new type of insulations you can buy that are non-toxic and they don't off-gas, different types of wool and denim insulations, and a lot of recycled materials that can be used. And there's even a lot of reclaim. So obviously in the tiny house world, a lot of people like to build with reclaimed materials and stuff like that. And that's, like I said, booming industry. But even the advancement of certain technologies for just comfort living, like I talk a lot with customers about heat return ventilators, energy return ventilators, and the type of things that can improve air quality in a home, but also have the effect of using less air conditioning, using less heating, because you're not opening windows to vent your home or doing other things like that. So there's technology, new stuff coming out that really hits multiple layers of the construction of a home and use of a home that help with green building, sustainability, and those kind of things.
Oh, excellent. And do you have any favorite resources, or, as far as people who are building a tiny home and they're looking for these green technologies, or do you have any favorite resources, or do you in general just sort of search by, I need a really high quality air exchange, or, I need a really good green insulation?
So I think for me, I approach that on a different way, I think, than a consumer does. So for me, I actually tend to read a lot of building science white papers, or checking into some kind of industry leaders or thought leaders on certain things, whether it be insulation or, heating and cooling, or just framing even, and try to kind of take some information I get there and do a bit of my own independent research, and then kind of exchange that into what's the best product that matches that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I think that actually would be helpful for consumers, especially looking at some of these more builder specific. They probably have a lot more, versus just Googling it, they probably have a lot more research behind it, and a lot of, like you said, a lot of people in the industry who are experts at this. So that's a good place to go. So thank you. Now, when people are considering going tiny, I know for us, we did not rush into it. Do you have, I know as a builder, you probably get a lot of people who are interested in it, but it might not be the best fit for them, or maybe it is a great fit for them. So what are kind of some of the things you tell people who are considering going tiny to think about?
Well, one of the things that I always try to talk to people about is the actual livability of the tiny home, because we get people that will reach out to us and they want a tiny home, and they want a 14-foot tiny home, or they want an 18-footer, and they've got one or two kids, or they've got 3 Great Danes, which is sometimes even more space consumption. And so what we try to do is we really try to not let people rush into it. I'm okay with not selling a tiny house or tiny house shell to somebody because it's not the right fit or something like that. But we really, really try to talk to them about the livability of the home. And I think that one of the ways you can get good information about that from a builder or a friend or someone else who's lived in a tiny house is just that. Try to talk to someone who either has spent a significant amount of time living tiny, living in an RV, or doing something like that, so that you know the intricacies of what your day-to-day pros and cons might be of living in a tiny house. Like I spend, sometimes if I'm renovating a property that's away from my house, I'll live for months in an RV. And one of the things that I learned very quickly is it's very hard to get dressed in an RV. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do know what you mean.
Yeah. And so I think having kind of someone that knows just something about the actual livability of small living is really beneficial. And just don't rush into it. Really think about it. Make the right decision for yourself. If you have to spend more money or put 4 extra feet on the tiny house, then do that. It's not something, or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe going even smaller is appropriate. So I just think that those things are really critical.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I agree 100%. And if we hadn't stepped into several tiny homes before designing our own, I think we would be in a very different spot right now. So it was, yeah, excellent. Now, when you have models that you're working on, do you do sort of tours for people? So I know for us, that was just invaluable to have our builder. We actually stepped into his model and then we kind of adjusted our plan from there. So is that something that you let people do, or do you send them to local people in the area?
So we always try to have something here. We only build really 2 things. We build tiny house shells, we build mobile offices. So what we do is we try to have a shell available for people to step into, but it's difficult. A shell customer who's buying a shell is just a different customer than they want a completed home where they want to see the finishes and everything else. There's a lot of creativity involved, and there's a lot of, oh, you could put this here and you could do this, that, and a lot of times designing for just a shell build can even be more complicated, because we try to guess at the 3 different ways they may end up wanting to do their bathroom, or they may end up wanting to do a kitchen. And so we try to design for multiple scenarios and multiple outcomes of floor plan or changes. So we definitely try to get them into a shell, at least that we have here. We have a couple of mobile offices here. And then, yeah, we know of a couple local builders who are very happy to let people tour a home and stuff like that. So, and the other thing we try to do is we try to get people out to the event, because the festival that we hold, it gives them a great opportunity to see numerous homes in various levels of completion.
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. If you haven't, for the listeners, if you haven't been to a tiny house festival, there are so many across the country. It's probably doubled in the last year. And I think you just, you can search and see what is in your area, or at least in your region. And I would definitely also recommend going to a festival. Now, with the Colorado Tiny House Festival, now this is in Brighton, correct?
Yep, Adams County Fairgrounds, just south of the actual town of Brighton.
Okay. And now with this festival, I really appreciate you saying, a lot of people go to these festivals and expect that they're going to be all finished builds. So, people are willing to share their homes, and it's a lot of work to get it there. And it's interesting to see, you want to see the different stages of builds to give you ideas, especially for those who are going the more DIY route. It's really neat. It's a really neat experience, and you get to network and meet several builders and people in the industry. So if you can make it out, try to find one in your local area, or come see us at the Colorado Tiny Fest, where I'll be speaking along with some other amazing people and vendors. And it's a really fun way to network and just get to know and step into a tiny house and get a feel of what size. And I think the other benefit is there's so many different sizes there and designs. So that's really a fun aspect of thinking of what you want to use your tiny house for. And we went pretty big, and we ended up having to get a camper as well, because the tiny house that we have is big because we're going to have a big family, which is great, but it's not really something that we can move weekly. So it's just kind of having those discussions as a family or with yourself of what this tiny house is going to look like in your future. So kind of design with the future in mind. I'd really like to touch on, I'm going to go back a little bit when you were talking about your shells. Now, we've been talking a lot, Art and I have been talking a lot about tiny house communities and the future of the movement. So right now there's this really neat time in the tiny house movement where we've got Appendix Q in the IRC code, correct?
Yes, in 2018.
So this has just been approved, and we're starting to see very slowly cities adopting this. Now let's talk about, for you as a builder, with the Appendix Q being approved, so how does that affect your build, and as far as, getting it inspected? And so let's talk about from a builder's perspective, so tiny home owners, or if they're or builders, what they should be thinking about as far as how they're building their tiny home to codes.
So the appendix is just a great thing. I mean, one of the things that if you talk to a lot of different builders, one of the things that happens is you find there's a lot of builders who will build a home, maybe not even build a second one because of a level of frustration, because of no standardization, no inspection, and that leads to other problems, parking and other financing or insurance or other problems. So I think the appendix is a really, really good thing. The building of a tiny home prior to the appendix, and the appendix, don't get me wrong, the appendix didn't solve all the problems. You know what I mean? It definitely is a great starting point. But it's opened up a whole new opportunity for different. We're seeing new companies that are coming out that want to offer inspection based on IRC code, not just RV code. And this is really important because prior to that, there's literally no way to follow IRC code to build a tiny home without making some changes. Normally tiny homes are built with 2x4 walls. You'd have to switch over to 2x6 walls. So I think it's a really, really good move, and I think it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for local jurisdictions, companies to offer better inspections, something more uniform. And of course, a lot of people, they don't like when government interferes or they start getting involved. But the fact is that you can't avoid that if you want to be legal, if you want to have the ability to make this a livable, permanent thing.
Yes, absolutely. And I know our tiny home was built way before all of this. So, but as someone who wants to park legally, I appreciate the code, and yeah, we'll probably have to do some remodeling, but that's what I'm willing to do to get a place to park. And I absolutely agree with you. And I think a lot of people go into this movement, they want freedom, they want to be off-grid, and that's fine. There's still places to do that. But some of us who want to live in a community, I'm okay with meeting like public health and safety regulations. That's okay with me because I would sure rather not burn down. So, I do also appreciate this sort of option to be uniform and safe, and that's really our goal. We can't really move this movement forward if we aren't at least meeting safety standards.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it would just be awful for the movement if you had a series of homes that were falling apart, burning down, doing stuff like that. It benefits everybody, whether you're building your own or buying from a builder. It's a really good move.
Excellent. Yes, thank you so much. Now let's touch a little bit. I know this has been, we've had several builders on the podcast and owners, and we talk about price a lot because there's a really lot of confusion about tiny home pricing, and there's a huge discrepancy, anywhere from $5,000 to $120,000. And so could you just, as from a builder's perspective, could you just speak a little bit about where these prices come from and why there's a discrepancy?
One of the biggest discrepancies in prices is quality and type of material. And so what you've got builders, and they may be a great quality builder who might use totally different materials. The reclaimed materials and some stuff that maybe they can even get at a lower cost. So there are some builders that will let people work with them to lower their costs. But the material is really the thing that's changed, especially in the last year. We personally have seen the cost of cedar, for instance, just in the last year and a half, the cost of cedar almost doubled. We've seen 2x4s go from $2 to $2.50 for grade 2 SPF lumber, which is what we like to use, grade 2 lumber, go from 2 to 250 to 3.5, and sometimes as close to $4. And so these increases in material costs have really impacted the bottom line of the cost of a building home, because we're using the same exact material. You're buying a lot of times from a builder, they're using the same material as the house that's being built on, the 2,000 square foot house being built on a foundation or maybe across the street. A lot of times we don't buy our material either from Home Depot or Lowe's. We're getting our material from the local lumber yard, and sometimes there's a premium associated with that. So and I think a lot of it is that there's been a big transition from builders who have built construction like residential homes, or they've been residential renovators or remodelers, or they own a roofing company and they want to start building a tiny home. And what you get is that you get people who are familiar with building code, which has changed over the last several years. I mean, if you live in Florida, it costs more to build a home than if you live in Oklahoma, and even if you were to use the same material. And that's mostly because energy code regulations and things like that might require additional materials. So when you get these folks that are coming out of residential construction into tiny home construction, they're using the same costly materials, good, really high quality, costly materials to build small. And one of the things that's a really big misconception is that building a tiny home is more easy, and it's just not. There's a lot of restrictions: height, width, weight, and there's all sorts of engineering and variances involved. You want to make sure that your home will withstand Category 4 earthquake, hurricane, and so there's a lot that goes into these, and because of that, it's mostly been a change in material. Here's another thing that I think has happened is that a lot of builders offer a home to a customer that is completely custom. That means that they're building built-ins, they're building cabinetry, they're building a sofa that might slide out into a couch, and it's all custom. When you do a lot of work like that, there's so much labor involved, and you have to hire extra people. There are definitely options out there to save money and get a home for cheaper, and a great home. You got to really look at, I think, the detail as far as what one builder is offering for $120,000 versus what a builder might be offering for 70 or 80. You know what I mean?
Right, absolutely. Well, that actually brings me into my next question, because you are unique in the fact that you do shells. So what kind of was your motivation behind that, and what makes your business unique as a tiny home builder?
Well, I think DIYers are near and dear to my heart because, that's been me. We only, like, around here, if anything needs to be fixed, I fix it. We figure it out. We do it. It's been a very, very rare occasion that I'll hire someone to come out and do work at my home or anything like that. So the DIY crowd is it's very near and dear to my heart. And, there's a level of gratitude and appreciation for finishing your own home. And so, or building your own home. So what I wanted to do is try to find a happy balance. So I'm able to give somebody a completely custom build, because we'll do a completely custom shell, but they get the opportunity to finish it the way that they want. And so it really is a completely custom build. You get the absolute gratification of finishing a home, building your own home, but you also get to know that the structure itself is warranted. It doesn't leak. It's airtight. It's engineered appropriately. It's square. It's straight. It's roadworthy. You know what I mean? So it's, in my opinion, it's a great option for people who want to do some work themselves, but want to make sure it's done right.
Oh, I just love that, because, you're doing the really nitty gritty stuff that is built to code. And then, like the stuff like cabinetry and stairs. I mean, that stuff, it still needs to be built to the Appendix Q if you want to live legally, but it does give them, you can save money, you can use reused materials, and that's really neat. I really appreciate that, because I think that's definitely a nice happy middle. It's nice, because that's the hard, you're doing the hardest part, right? That's the hardest part, is getting to that shell, and then the other stuff they can pick away at as they see fit. So, oh, neat. Very exciting. And I also noticed that you do airtight construction. So can you touch on that a little bit? Because I know air quality is a huge thing in tiny homes. And I know we have had to have like just a little mini dehumidifier in ours, and we burn the wood burning stove to just kind of keep the moisture down. So could you touch on that just a little bit?
Well, airtight construction is kind of a construction movement. I mean, whether it's regular homes or tiny homes, you see that a lot of custom home builders are really making a larger effort to build a tighter home. And it's required, actually. A lot of new IRC code requires exterior insulation or different types of ways of sealing a home. And so we think that the whole airtight construction thing is just critically important. So like you said, air quality is important to folks. When we're building a tiny home, what we do is we take a multi-layered approach basically to airtight construction. There are areas on a tiny home where air leaks like crazy, and it's little things that a lot of people don't think about. When we're bolting the walls to the trailer, we're creating a hole, you know what I mean? And so we do the little things. We put acoustic sealants even on those bolts so that when they go through, there's a seal basically between the sill plate and the trailer to prevent any air leak. And then we basically cover every nail, every screw, every staple, depending on if we're wood frame or steel frame, on the outside of the home with either a liquid flash or a tape. And so another thing that we do is we actually take into consideration a lot where people plan on living with their home. So if we have a customer who is going to be living in South Texas, or they're going to be living in Southern Florida exclusively with their tiny house, we will complete the exterior differently than if it was someone who's going to travel all over the country. Because you have, in different climates, you have people that are cooling and dehumidifying year-round. So you want to try to have a zero permeable exterior on the home, whereas living in Colorado, you want to just have regular house wrap or zip board or something that can breathe. But air quality is critically important because as the homes become more airtight, you can create a lot of problems in a home. You can have a buildup of moisture, which can create a mold or mildew problem, even a carbon monoxide problem to some degree. I mean, if it's going to really depend on how airtight the structure is. The other issue is that previously a lot of people would count on a fix for an airtight construction. So what they would do is they'd slap a house together and then they would put spray foam. They put like open cell or closed cell, most time closed cell spray foam in the walls to aid in airtight construction. And what you see is that really should be moved to the outside of the stick framing or the steel. So you want the airtightness to come from the sheathing of the home, not necessarily from anywhere else. You know what I mean?
Oh, neat. Yeah, gosh. That's really nice to know because, yeah, we definitely did the spray foam. And in Minnesota, I know there's some special laws about R value. So, yeah, no, that's really neat moving forward because I think, like you said, it's always evolving. We're always learning. We're always improving on these things, right? So
that's something that people sometimes when I talk about insulation, it sounds like I don't like spray foam, but that's not true. I love spray foam insulation.
Oh, really? Because I can't stand it because it's toxic, but that's all we could afford.
It does off gas. It is toxic for a period of time. Sometimes, depending on the insulation you get, if it can off gas to a point and not off gas really anymore. However, spray foam is just, I mean, it's a great product. It serves so many great purposes. But I think that there are better options today. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. We were looking into aerogel. Have you heard of aerogel?
I have not.
It's one of the green options. And oh my gosh, it would have quadrupled our price. But I'm like, oh, someday, and I know you use a lot of wool. Now so I would like to touch on the wool just for a second because when we were looking into it, again, this was like, almost 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. We were looking into it 4 years ago. So, I mean, since then it's improved a ton. But when we were looking into wool or jean or some of these more green products, the issue was that we would need such 5 inches thick to meet our value code for Minnesota. So could you touch a little bit? Because I heard you discussing rock wool, or I'm assuming they've really improved the thickness since then.
So it's still a bit of a problem. So in a 2x4 wall cavity, if you put rock sole or rock wool insulation in, you're only going to get about an R13 to 15. And so generally you can put you can buy 3.5-inch rock wool insulation. It's R15. And so you're not going to meet those requirements, but there are alternate options to help you meet those requirements. So one of the things that we recommend to people is that if they want to hit like an R21 or plus in a wall and they don't want to do spray foam, then we recommend exterior foam or even exterior rock sole or what's called comfort board insulation. So you can get the real consideration, though, with that on a tiny house, especially one that they intend on moving, is the width of the home. So, for instance, if we have people that want to buy steel frame tiny house shell, we steer them away from going 8'2" or 8'4" with the trailer because we really try to convince them to do a exterior continuous insulation, like insulated zip board, which is like an R3 or an R6 zip board, which is either 1 or 1.5 inches thick with either 1/2 inch or 1-inch foam on it. It's rigid foam. Or we do the quiet comfort board on the outside, the rock sole. So what you do is you're going to gain insulation on the exterior. And so that will help, obviously, with a lot of those R value requirements. The downside is that some of those products make the home really heavy. So there's just so many things you have to take into consideration. And
no, that's good to know, though. At least people know their options, because I know insulation is a huge hot button issue when it comes to tiny homes. And, but if you do the insulation, but then go with a lighter, like for us, we did smart side siding.
Oh yeah, the LP, that stuff's great.
Yeah, so it's great, but it's pretty heavy, right? So like if we, so you can kind of like, okay, well maybe we would go with a lighter outer cover. I see, I'm not a builder. I don't know what it's called. What's it?
So the LP stuff's actually pretty lightweight. The James Hardy board is the stuff that's the cement. So the new LP, the composite fiber siding, is fairly lightweight. But there are other products that look the same that are super heavy, like James Hardy is a concrete fiber, basically. And it's really durable, but it's super heavy.
Would a type of metal siding be a way that people could even reduce weight even further?
Yeah. And metal's a great option. Metal's great for exteriors for a couple reasons. Number one, if you don't want seams in your siding, then you should break it up with metal. And then the other option is weight. The one downside to metal siding is that depending on the color, you can absorb a lot of heat. So it's something to consider. Or if you're going to do that, then go with the right metal provider where you're getting a good UV resistant type paint. But yeah, metal is a great and a really, really popular option for the exterior.
And I really like the look of metal. What I've heard from community builders is you want to look as much like a regular home as possible just until we get this movement going, because cities are going to want you more if you look just like a cute little cottage. But from a practicality standpoint, I love metal for its lightweightness, and I think it looks really cool. So like you said, I mean, the options are endless, and it's just kind of considering where are you thinking of putting this, and are you going to be on the road a lot? Does weight matter to you because you're going to be pulling it yourself? Are you going to have to hire out anyway, so it really doesn't matter, those couple extra pounds? So,
I mean, weight is such a thing with tiny homes. And you're absolutely right. They should look like a home. I mean, there are so many reasons why they should look like a home and not just like a shed on wheels. We always recommend that people put overhangs on for watershed and also for maybe you want to throw gutters on the home or something. So when we're installing a roof or when we're designing a home with people, we will even, like me personally, I recommend to people they throw a 4-inch overhang on each side of the home. It does make it so that it's not road legal. So it's there's obviously a catch involved that part of the home is going to be wider than 8'6". However, it's pretty uncommon for a state trooper to want to bust out a ladder and go up and measure you at the overhangs.
yeah, especially if you're only planning on moving it a couple times.
Exactly. But the benefit of having the watershed to your siding and to your windows and stuff like that is really, really invaluable. And if you want to go to a gutter, like someone who runs gutter through a machine, they actually make smaller gutters for manufactured housing, like mobile homes. And so you can get those thrown up on a 6-inch fascia board of your tiny house. So, if you're going to see a builder, you should make sure that when they put the metal on the roof, they're putting like maybe a 3/4 to a 1-inch overlay of metal roofing so that the water would shed into a gutter if you should ever do something like that. So there's a lot of little considerations there. And just because it looks like a home, there's obviously that benefit of it looking like a home, because everyone wants to drive into a tiny house community where they look like just smaller little Victorian cottages or modern type homes, and they that's what they look like. But the benefits to the people who bought them far outweigh even just how cute they look.
Yep. Absolutely. And, I want to touch on the gutter part because I can completely attest to that. Ours is road legal, so it does not have the overhang. And I can tell you that whatever is under the roof, you probably would know. We have the metal roof. Whatever's under that, it's black. And so every time it rains, that black starts dripping down the side of the house, all over the windows. We got mold in the window, little crevices on the outside of the windows. So we're always having to wash it and wipe it down because it's got this black film just running down the side of our house, and the windows are always funky colors. So I can definitely attest to that being a huge benefit. And I can tell you that we've moved our house 4 or 5 times. And yeah, nobody cares. Nobody's measuring or no one's stopping us, or they're just like, oh, cool, look at that, So I don't think they're going to be measuring an inch of your roof sticking out.
No, actually, it's funny. I saw a post the other day by Shorty Robbins, who works with the United Tiny House Association, John and Finn. And she had mentioned that she's actually been pulled over a couple times with her home. And both times they measured it for road legality, which it's not legal at the overhangs, but she never got a ticket for it because they didn't measure the overhangs. And so there's obviously a bit of risk there, but I think the benefit outweighs the potential for everyone has to decide what they want to do.
Well, and we know who to hire when we need to finagle our gutters on somehow.
That's right.
But yes, gutters. Water is a big issue, and and then you can have a cute little rain collection barrel. And that was our goal is, we could collect rain and use it for flowers or whatnot. So you don't want to be drinking that water or anything. It's running off your roof with squirrel and bird poop and whatever else is up there. But it definitely would work for some flowers. So.
Yeah, it's a non-potable water source.
Yeah, right. Now, as far as the Colorado Tiny Festival, any insider, now you're the organizer, so any insider tips or things to look forward to, or, where, let's talk about last year versus this year as far as expected, how many people are going to show up?
So, last year the Tiny House Jamboree left Colorado. And so we spent a significant amount of time. It was almost 2 months just trying to find a venue to do the event. And we actually stumbled on the Wild Animal Sanctuary kind of as a last minute up in Kingsburg, Colorado. It's kind of last minute thought. Oh, let's see if they have any room. And it just happened that they had just renovated their event center, their welcome center, and they had basically set aside 6 acres for events, and they were wide open. So we only had about 5 weeks to market the event. We had almost 20,000 people show up. It was great. We had almost 28 tiny homes, and it was a really great event. We had a great time. We had speakers. We had TrailerMade did a workshop. And so this year and then at the end of the event, we donated to the sanctuary. And so it was a great event for a great cause. Now this year, the venue change was mostly to allow better overnight camping. Overnight camping next to grizzly bears is not ideal. So this year we partnered with Adams County Fairgrounds, and we've got over 40 tiny houses that are going to be coming. And I'm not sure how much room exactly we've got. I'm hoping to know here by the end of the weekend, but we're going to try and have 60 to 70 homes there if possible. And one of the things we really learned from last year was we got to have way more homes at the event. And that's actually to help the customer, the people who are attending the event, be able to have more valuable conversations with builders or DIYers. Because we found that with the smaller number of homes and that many people showing up, the lines are very long. Maybe people felt a bit rushed. So I think this year is going to be great. We're going to have way more homes there. We're going to have great speakers like yourself.
Oh, you're so sweet.
No, it's going to be great. Last year we had speaking sessions every half an hour to hour all weekend. And this year we're going to cut that back and just have, I think, more topics that people are really, really concerned about or really interested in. Things like we'd like to actually do some people who have families live in a tiny house talk. We've even been thinking here in the last couple of days of doing like maybe a Q&A panel with people who live in a tiny home and have children.
Oh, I love that. Count me in.
Yeah, we would definitely do that. And so it's going to be an event. We're really hoping that our attendance will grow this year over last year, but it's hard to say. You never really know until Sunday when things are all wrapping down.
Well, gosh, we so look forward to it. And for those of you who are listening, if you can make it out to Colorado, it's nice and warm here. It's great. We got great weather, lots of sun. So bring your sunscreen or, well, only organic, sustainable, fair trade sunscreen, of course. So yeah, we're really excited and I can't wait to see what the turnout is. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. And as far as some last words for our guests, any, overarching words of wisdom as far as, tiny houses, tiny house movement, if someone's coming into this new or even if they're already there, what is sort of your biggest inspiration or advice for people just kind of ready for this movement to move forward?
My initial thought on the tiny house movement or buying a tiny house is not to give up on the tiny house movement. The people have been building tiny homes for, like, look at Jay Schaefer. He started Tumbleweed over 15 years ago. And, a lot of people think that this is a fad. It's not a fad. 100 years ago, people were living in a much smaller home. And you find that all these things are cyclical. People are finding that they can live with a lot less. And anyone who's actually listening and lives in a 3,000 square foot home, they know that they only use 1 or 2 rooms in their home. They only live in a very small part of their 2,500 square foot home. And so I would tell people, that first and foremost, if you can't find a place to park, then the option is not to give up. It's to get more involved. Get with people who live near you or people who are on Facebook and together and see if you can make some changes. Because really, I think that's the only way that change is made, is people have to work together. You have to be heard. One of the major problems with parking and legality is you've got, in many, many cases in a jurisdiction, you've got folks that they've been there, they've worked there a long time. And there are so many things that the tiny house movement kind of goes against the grain of government. The government wants you to live in a 3,000 square foot home and pay more taxes and pay more into them. But what they don't realize is that if you can have, in that same 3,000 square foot home, you might be able to have 4 tiny homes and have a community, and you're bettering society, and the end result to the government, to the local jurisdiction, is the same.
Right. Because you'll be able to spend the money in the community versus on your home. Exactly.
So there's going to require some shift in thought, and it's going to have to happen at all levels. And so my first piece of advice on the tiny house movement is, if you want to live in a tiny house, it's something you should get involved in. Work with a builder, find people local who want to change the rules, build a community, and start there. And there's 100 ways from Sunday to build a community, whether it's get together and buy an old RV park that might be zoned, or buy some property and see if you can't get some jurisdictional changes. That's my first piece of advice. Because if you can't live in them, and you can't live in them legally, then people are not going to build them. So that's, I guess, my first piece of advice. But the second thing would be, whether you're going to buy or build a tiny home, I think inspection is critically important. So spend the money on Pacific West. I just learned about one called Buildsworth yesterday. spend the money on inspection so that you can kind of future-proof your building. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That way, if a year from now, Adams County, where I live, decides to let people live in a tiny house, you might already be set. You might have your certification. You can just move right in. So that's another really good piece of advice. We always strongly recommend people do that. And if you're going to go with a builder, if you're going to do a builder or something like that, do your research. Find somebody who is going to build your house correctly, build it to code, and just the normal. Those are normal things. Whether you're buying a 2,000 square foot home or a 200 square foot home, make sure you're getting with someone reputable and they're going to do a good job for you.
Excellent. Yes, absolutely. And I think we had discussed the other day about if you are a DIYer, just the documentation so that you can pass your inspection if you have already built it or you're in the process of building it. So is it just taking pictures and having your, everything written down so people know how to get past these inspections?
Yeah, it obviously depends on who's doing the inspection and whether they're going to want video or pictures. So do both. And that starts at the very beginning. Some inspections want to see insulation in the trailer if you're not doing a foundation build. So take a picture or video of every step of the process. And it's that doesn't mean you have to take a picture of every stud that you put together, but take a picture of each wall and take a picture of all your insulation. When you start doing electrical, get pictures, get video. So yeah, really covet that information, because if you want to do an inspection later, that might be the only way you can do it without ripping parts of your house apart.
Right. Oh, thank goodness we were on HGTV.
There you go.
We did not do a lot of documenting. Excellent. Well, thank you. What wonderful advice. Now, for people who are looking to find your business and your festival, where can they find you?
Sure. So the festival is ColoradoTinyHouseFestival.com. And from there, you can get links to all of our social media and all the information about the site and tickets and volunteering or showing a home or being a vendor is all there on the website. And for tiny house shells or mobile office, it's EinsteinHomes.com, and it's spelled EINSTYNE homes.com. It's spelled wrong, ironically.
Oh, I love it. No, that's great. Well, gosh, thank you so much, Art. Your wisdom, your knowledge, and what you're doing for the movement. We so appreciate having you, and thank you for taking the time for being here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you so much for listening. Please tell us what you think. Our email is sustainablelivingpodcast@gmail.com. And we have a website with also show notes, sustainablelivingpodcast.com. And you can support us on Patreon. Just look for a Sustainable Living Podcast. Bye for now.